Hello and welcome to the 2024 iESE conference, Out of the Frying Pan and Into the Fire. My name's Andrew Larner, I'm from iESE and I'm here with my colleague, also from iESE, John Comber. So John, this first session is a little bit different in that whilst everybody has experience of being within local government, we're currently not serving local authority officers or members. The conference title, Out of the Frying Pan Into the Fire, the genesis of that sort of discussion came from looking backwards initially. So tell us a little bit about coming into iESE and seeing the awards, the award scheme, and looking at the different entries from over the years and how the ideas started to generate from that.
So one of the huge benefits to the iESE award programme is you get to serve the best practice throughout the UK and from abroad, international entries as well. So you're seeing the best that local authorities and local public services have to offer at their very best of delivering services and working with their communities. And so as you see that best practice, you realise that when you're working in an individual local authority, as I did as a chief exec, I don't have access to that overview of best practice. I don't have access to all of those niceties of the future being out there, but in pieces spread across different organisations. And so what the awards process allows us to do in the research programme is ferret out that best practice, test that it's working in each individual authority, and then make that available by getting those local authorities to tell their story in the best way possible so that others can decide, is that something they would want to do? Is that something they should be thinking about doing? Would it work for them in their locality? And if it would, they know who to talk to and how to access that best practice. And that means they're making informed decisions. And part of the Out of the Frying Pan Into the Fire title is about recognising that sometimes when you make decisions with imperfect information, the situation can end up with unintended consequences, with perhaps matters not going as well as they could or even getting worse. And by looking at what others have done and looking at it in a way where it's been tested to make sure it's effective, you can take a decision in the knowledge that what you're looking at doing is a known quantity and will be able to deliver very quickly in the locality that you're in. And that really addresses the issue about being able to scale good ideas and innovation up within the industry and adopt it very quickly. Because as we know, one of the challenges for local public services is innovation is cutting edge in some of them, but it takes a very long time for that to become the norm.
Yep. And one of the things I think I particularly like about the awards and the way that yourself and the other judges approach it is if a theme comes through, if there are 9 or 10 submissions on a new area, you don't wait till next year to adjust the sort of submission form and invent a new category. It's done on the fly. So it's literally hot off the press that you'll get this is the new award on or this or that subject. So it's a responsive approach, which I think is really helpful. If you're a chief exec, you get to see literally the latest thing that your colleagues are talking about.
And it's also true, if there aren't any submissions, we close a category of awards as having had its day.
Yep.
And as you say, the most important thing is that we keep up to date with the challenges that are currently facing the industry and look at the responses that are being used to address those challenges.
So one of those newer areas, it's an old area really, is around housing. We know just from the number of people contacting us, there are issues with housing stock. There are issues that frankly have been around for a while and they're not particularly innovative in terms of the nature of the problem, but in terms of the opportunity to make housing that's less impactful on the environment, to find new ways of dealing with those problems, there are some interesting things coming through. And the same is true, of course, of every subject. And one of the things that we have tried to do is to take that to create some kind of framework where you can objectively measure impact one project against another and try and see a little bit into the future. And that's something that you've commented on, that the leading projects have is something around foresight. Maybe you could say a little bit more about the role and the need for foresight in that regard.
It used to be the case that best practice was enough. But with the industry moving at such a pace, it's actually often the case that best practice is past practice. It's what people used to do. So one of the challenges is being able to see around the corner, see what's coming and prepare for it. Not just prepare for it, but be resilient and able to deal with it. So I think one of the roles that local public services have to play with their communities is to be able to predict the future. And that's all well and good to say, but it requires trend analysis, it requires a good knowledge and outward-looking group of officers and members who can see what others are doing, but also can see how the world is changing, and they can react to that. And it's something that no other body is doing for their local community. In other words, the local community themselves can't see the future. They can't necessarily see round the corner, whereas the local authority can do that for them and make sure that they're prepared. So I think it's a very powerful tool which moves us from best practice into future best practice. And really what that's about is saying that doing the same old thing at a better and better standard may not be the answer.
Yep.
Often innovation is about not doing something or doing it radically different or in a transformed way. And so that innovation needs to be accessible to local public services, available to them in a way that they can adopt quickly and scale at pace so that they can keep up with the changes occurring in the world.
Yep. And having those international examples, for me at least, gives it makes it easier to see the future, because some of the countries that we work with that use the iESE model are testing boundaries that we haven't even thought of yet. I mean, as you know, privileged to go to Dubai and see what they're doing there. And when I was there working with the Dubai police, they already had a drone first response system. So the drone would go to the road traffic accident and actually determine that if there's nobody hurt, that's fine, cancel the ambulances, etc. But then the next bit they're already looking at is they're training on their flying motorbikes, and they're looking at licensing the first flying roads. So you can envisage the planning authority giving you planning permission to land your car on the balcony, outside your apartment as the next big thing. So sometimes we sort of think of those sort of science fiction movies as being, never going to happen. But actually, in some countries, those things are starting to happen, and they kind of throw a challenge to us. I mean, whether we want those things to happen or not, but also if we do, how they're going to impact upon us. And one of the sessions we've got, of course, is around cybersecurity. Well, the context of that, particularly now with tensions between Ukraine and Russia, with Iran and Israel coming online as well. The obvious thing as a first strike, as happened in Ukraine, is to the digital infrastructure. Well, the digital infrastructure now means sending an update to all of the solar inverters in every house to switch all the power off, or something equivalent. So the means of attack are broadening. And so one of the sessions is going to look at how, at the community level, at the council level, you can actually protect the nation, as it were, in a distributed infrastructure. So that's, I think, and that comes out of seeing that future emerging around the world and being able to read that back and say, oh, actually, aren't we exposed? What do we need to do about that? So, and again, that future best practice that comes off the back of that.
And I think it's really important to recognise that that notion of foresight has to be able to predict that future coming into reality. It's true, Teslas with no driver are operating as cabs in California legally, and people are routinely catching a car that's taking them to a place using AI, debiting their phone, they're getting out, and the vast majority of those journeys are perfectly safe. It's also true that flying cars are a reality. They're not yet in mass production, but they're not far from it. And again, we need to be prepared for what's happening across the rest of the world. And that's a perspective that iESE bring to the table with its international awards category. And I think it's very important to recognise that what we see as best practice and future best practice is not just in the UK. It is harvested from around the world as best we can do that to make sure we see each of those perspectives. Not only does that mean that we can showcase the UK local public services and what they're doing, but it also means we can learn. And the most important thing for all local public services is that we're learning as quickly as we can so that the decisions they're making are informed. They're informed by what others are doing and therefore allowing them to make the best possible decision they can at the time they're being asked to make it.
Yep. So we've got some of that wrapped up in the sessions. We've got the housing session. We've got some of that technology in use in care services. We've got some speakers around that. We've got, of course, green and green energy as a piece. We've got, of course, artificial intelligence is the buzzword that most are using, but actually in very practical terms, we've got some responses to, for example, tall building fires, like sadly happened in Grenfell, where the entrepreneurial approach has said, actually, okay, you can change the panels, but the fire can go inside the building. So how do we stop the fire occurring in the first place? And the use of AI linked to the sockets themselves to stop electrical fires and actually linked to the cab of the fire engine, etc., as an approach. So, and of course that throws another challenge. We are very set in how we go and procure and actually how we onboard new technology. And you mentioned, leading edge to trailing edge, and quite often you can talk about a decade in local government for something new becoming the norm. Actually, with smaller, more entrepreneurial companies, they might even not get into that first leading edge because they might get screened out completely. So our procurement needs to be aligned to onboarding that. And that would be an interesting awards this year, Surrey, where they have a group whose job it is to go out and look for new technologies and see how they might apply in services. So it's starting to happen in the approach. So that skill set that we need, and of course we're talking about skills that we need going forward, that skill set on how you can act as that civic entrepreneur, working with those commercial entrepreneurs who've got new ideas that we can onboard into our daily working lives and into the lives of our residents and local businesses.
It's a really important area, and if we look at assistive technology, we've got examples which will be talked about in the conference of Alexa being used to help independent living. We've got examples of robotics helping home care staff be able to safely lift people and move them around. We've got examples of AI being used to deal with fall recognition and emergency situations. It's right that the knowledge and skills that are required to operate in that new world need to be developed within the industry, need to be developed within the profession. And that's difficult because it needs the time to look ahead, to see what's necessary, to look at the education system, to look at the professional training system and see whether or not they're fit for purpose, and if not, to be able to change them. We know we've got a problem with the age profile in local public services and retirement. We've known that for a long time. We know that we have a challenge with retaining skills and getting people to think of a career in local government. And we need to combat that. We need to make sure that when people are leaving school, when people are leaving university, that they're considering local public services as a potential career because it's been properly set out what that career would involve, the richness of those professions involved in local public services, and how satisfying a career it can be. Now, local public services have lagged behind the private sector in some situations, for example, in working from home, flexible working, but COVID accelerated that. So those benefits had to be addressed almost immediately. So from crisis has come a whole new world of local government being far more flexible about where you work to deliver services. Allied to that is COVID also showed how volunteering can be such a powerful tool in a moment of crisis. How do we harness that in community enablement to get local public services to work with their communities in such a way that participative democracy, active citizenship are routine, so that people are given the knowledge, skills and resources to help themselves, sometimes with the local authority stepping out the way to let them get on with it. Now, all of that is going to be addressed to some extent in the conference, and it leads us to asking the question, how can we provide an environment today that will allow the managers and leaders of the future to leapfrog into that future, to do things that we thought were never possible from when we were sitting at the coalface and thinking about the best way that we could deliver services. How do we create an industry where people can genuinely take it to a new level? And what's required to do that? And in many ways, it's some of the basics that local government and local public services have always faced. If you get a very mixed group of people in a room, you're more likely to get innovation. You're more likely to get equalities. You're more likely to get representation. These are not things that are new, but they can be used in different ways to achieve more than they've achieved in the past. And I think that's part of the secret going forward, to expose those organisations that are using those new innovative techniques and say, can we learn from them? And as you've said, the supply chain is always tied up with procurement rules. And we know that we're not getting as much as we should out of procurement, not as much as we should in social value, not as much as we should in corporate social responsibility and all those other things. So how do we manage the supply chain to work to best effect? And part of that is we've asked some people with histories of working in local government, now working in the private sector as advisors to local government, using their rich experience to influence what local public services are doing. We've asked some of those people to talk about their experience, to talk about what they see as the future for local government, what they're seeing as advisors and being asked to do for local government. Now that's quite innovative, not starting with the industry itself, but starting with people who've worked in the industry but gone on to work as advisors. But we think it will provide a very rich knowledge of how other perspectives see local government and what perhaps they're bringing to the table to try and improve it.
Excellent. And we know that if you don't look at that in a fundamental way, if you're not thinking about new skills, new ways of working, then all you're going to do is apply all that technology, all that hard kit to the current business processes and fossilise it. Our best authorities, those that have really got the Council of the Year and other awards on a regular basis, are the ones where they've got the soft skills, they're building vibrant communities that actually need them less, ultimately, as well as using the latest technology to then enhance that new way of working as opposed to just putting lipstick on the pig. So that first session then, setting that, what does the future look like, a futurology if you like, to sort of get the ball rolling for the conference. So that's a fantastic start. Thanks, John, for that exploration of the issues that we're going to come across over the course of the conference. And thank you as well to our sponsors, in particular Zap Carbon, the gold sponsor for this year for iESE. We're now going to start with our first session entitled Futurology, where we're going to explore what that landscape for future local public services looks like and for their communities.